revenue is not created equally. I have people come to me all the time and say, Zane, what do you think my company's worth? You think it's going to trade on a multiple of EBITDA, a multiple of revenue? What do you think it's worth, man? Show me some comps and precedents. As we look at it, that's really not the right question. The right question is, what is each one of my revenue centers worth? If you go to your income statement and look at your revenue centers, some of them are services, some of them might be subscriptions, some of them might be a combination of services and recurring revenue, project-based work, some of it's recurring services. Your revenue stream is going to have a much higher value if it's recurring. I had a client, his name was Ross, unbelievable guy, amazing story. He came to me and he was doing a little over 10 million in revenue. And I looked at it and said, this could be interesting, but when we started looking at his revenue streams, Francis, most of it was, 95% of it was recurring subscription services to churches running their websites, running their giving programs. That was incredibly sticky. The churches stayed with them and they paid him a percent of everything, all their giving receipts. So if you've ever done text to give or give online, he ran this for all these churches and not-for-profits. When we looked at the business, he was making a little money, but not much. We found out that those revenue streams had such good recurring nature, stickiness, great margins. His cost of delivery was low because it was a piece of software that just kept working, behind the scenes. He was able to get 7 to 7.5 times revenue, forward forecasted run rate revenue for that business versus a company that's just doing, let's say, project work. They're doing building buildings or doing websites or just doing project work that I need. They're going to trade for maybe 3 to 4 times earnings. He wasn't even making much money and he was trading times revenue. And I've got an example for every one of my 17 reasons because we've seen these patterns over and over again. And I just want entrepreneurs to get to see the end of the movie, right? So they can create their happy ending because some of the endings aren't so happy. Buyers and investors do this every day. They look at companies, they assess them, they take your blood, your financials as a company, they interview your people, and then they say, hey, this is worth something. Most owners do this one time in their life. Somebody knocks on their door and say, hey, I might want to buy your company, and they do not understand the needle movers. And so it's too important. We're talking tens and tens of millions of dollars for even small technology companies. And we need to be educated. And what I like to do is educate people early so you can build with the end in mind. You can look at these 17 reasons and say, do I have documented systems and processes? Do I have a buttoned up legal strategy? Are my contracts consistent? Do I have financial operations where I'm closing same time on the following month? I have all my key performance indicators. Because this is what it takes to build value. Value, Francis, is not built ad hoc. Oh, I'm going to show up today and make some calls, write a little code, talk to some customers, make some key hires. No, it is done intentionally, on purpose. And if you don't do that, you are not being a good steward of your time. What I like to tell people, I'm candid, right? You're either ignorant or you're uninformed and uneducated. I prefer to think you're uneducated because if you start understanding these common sense principles, and really, Francis, I've just observed the top private equity groups in the country that invest in technology companies. over and over in the thousands of meetings with them, with my clients and my own companies. And you start seeing this pattern recognition of how they do due diligence, what they look for. And then you start understanding why. They're the best investors in the world. And then strategic buyers, publicly traded companies buying small companies. Francis, the due diligence is the same. They ask these same questions, like this one. What's your barrier to entry? And when an entrepreneur sits on the other side of the table unprepared and says, oh, well, what do you mean? And they say, what's your defensible moat? Francis, why can't I just come in and set up shop in your city? I've got more money, more capital, and hire better people, and just put you out of business. And when you have a fuzzy answer to that question, they're gone. Because why is your business valuable? I'll just go set up shop and compete. But when you have a barrier to entry, when you have a secret sauce, when you know and your clients know why you're different, that's something that's valuable. Let me just give one example. I had a buddy that went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual conference. So Warren Buffett, who's unbelievable, and Charlie Munger, his partner, sitting next to him. And my friend came back and said, man, it was the most interesting conference because, Warren Buffett, what an investor. And this is just going to make my point on one of my 17 reasons, which is, do you have a barrier to entry? Do you have a defensible moat? Are piranhas in that moat? Alligators protecting your business, the food on the table for your family, the college education for your kids that your competitor wants to steal, your employees' families. Warren Buffett all day had talked about defensible moats and the importance of them and why in their portfolio they had a lot of companies that had really good defensible moats. Well, there was a guy in line that walked up and asked the question during question and answer, walked up to a simple mic, middle of the floor, about 800 people in the audience. Warren and Charlie were sitting behind just like a cafeteria table because they're very, frugal. And the guy said, Warren, I own a family business, nice sized business. And I've heard all day you talking about defensible moats and what their importance is. Could you tell me how I could build a defensible moat for my business? Audience, very quiet. Warren Buffett leaned up to the little mic on his table and said, damn if I know. That's the reason I purchase them. So Francis, look at the value of that. Warren Buffett doesn't go out and try to create them. He purchases companies that have them because you can't greenfield that. So I ask entrepreneurs all the time, what makes you different? As an investment bank, for me, an advisor, I walk in, sometimes I'm competing with companies, everybody on their staff has a Yale or Harvard or Wharton MBA. They've got an unbelievable pedigree. They're from New York or San Francisco or Boston. And I walk in to present. It's like, what is my defensible moat as a banker? And you know what? Over time, you figure out what makes you different. And like for me, man, I went to Auburn, dude. I have a theology degree, master's in theology. But what I figured out is, why do people do business with us? And you know what? My defensible moat that my competition sometimes can't do, and I have to lean on it because I got a chip on my shoulder about my education. Now, our people have Harvard degrees and stuff, but not me. I was an operator. I was blessed enough to start 2 companies on a PowerPoint and sell them to publicly traded companies. Most of my competitors are much better educated than me, but they don't understand what technology entrepreneurs go through to build their software, to build a plane while they're flying it, to hire their first salespeople, to have security issues with their code, to go and try to beat very large software companies when your balance sheet is thin. I figured out that my defensible moat is my experience. And I play that card now. That doesn't work in every case, but a lot of times those entrepreneurs that are software folks, they connect with me and say, I feel like he understands me. And he understands the business of software. And so therefore, I've tried to turn that aspect into a barrier to entry. And again, most of my competitors they were always professionally in private equity and investment banking, not operators. So that's just an example. And we all have to look at that, because my barrier to entry, again, it's not my education. It's not that we're in Boston or New York and we're in Alabama. Well, how do you turn that into a barrier of entry? Culture. What if, when you need barriers to entry, not just with your customers, but with the people you're trying to recruit? One of my 17 reasons is, if you don't build a culture of talent where you can hire and retain talent, you will never interest an investor, because they bet on the jockey, not the horse. So you have to have all these things, not just for clients, but for recruits. So what's my barrier to entry for a recruit? How do I compete against, Goldman Sachs and Houlihan Lokey and Harris Williams, Lazard, for the best and brightest young people coming out of school? I'm in Alabama, y'all. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and Alabama. Guess what we figured out? We've got a barrier to entry. What if you're a sharp, amazing young female or male that is really, really smart, good in finance, econ, want to be in the investment banking space, but you like the South. You like Southeastern Conference football. You like skiing on Lake Martin. You married a spouse that likes down here because you got babies and in-laws that will keep those babies. You like the church down here, the culture. You like a company where you're not expected to work 90 hours a week like Wall Street is, because it's the culture. Still work 65 or 70, but you could actually still have a life. We're able, that's a barrier to entry, and people will move here. And so all these 17 reasons are not just about being attractive to customers, and it's about being attractive to buyers and investors, but that means being attractive to every stakeholder. Your recruits, your people that already work for you. If you can't retain your people, Francis, if my people come and I'm a revolving door, what does that say? It says I'm somehow misaligned. My culture, my opportunity for my stakeholders, and no buyer's interested in that. They want a team that's been around, that's knowledgeable, that understands the client base, the culture, the processes, the systems, the market. So being able to hire and retain best of breed talent, whether you're hiring customer service people at $20 an hour or a software architect at $125 an hour, can you get the absolute best person for that role in that seat? That gives you a competitive advantage. And buyers and investors know that. I was an IBMer and so grateful to IBM. I worked for IBM for 11 and a half years, started as a co-op at school. Just an amazing experience. Learned so much from Big Blue. I love them. And they ended up helping fund my company in kind that I left. My team invented a product on a project at FedEx that had to do with testing. And long story short, IBM let me take that intellectual property, move outside the company, raise money. They supported me. I was a subcontractor. That every one of my contracts was on IBM paper. And they let me leave. I guess I was 31 left. They funded me in kind, and then I had some wonderful investors here in Birmingham that came alongside, a bunch of angel investors that I call the Briarwood Mafia, and then Jemison Investments and Southeastern Technology Fund that I love to this day because they helped a young little entrepreneur get started. And we ran that company for 3 years. Saw pretty quickly that I wasn't the right CEO. And we went out, my investors lovingly encouraged me to get a professionalized management team. They said, man, you're a good sales guy, good, product management guy, but we need to get a real CEO in here. I said, that's fine, I'll be the founder and president. And we recruited Alan Ritchie, which is just an amazing guy. That's when you had worked with us some, Francis. And Alan had done it before, 2 deals before, came on board, just an humble man that was a fantastic partner, and he helped professionalize us. And 3 years after we started, we ended up getting a patent on web-based testing. And Alan helped architect with some investment bankers. When I first met investment bankers, I said, man, I miss my calling. Made a market for us, and we ended up selling that business to a publicly traded company in Boston called Houghton Mifflin in May of 2000. And the timing was right. It's all about timing. And I see these 17 reasons now of what we did right, what we did wrong. After that, we started a venture capital model incubator, started investing in software companies around here. Went through some pretty tough times in 2001 when planes hit buildings in September. Wasn't a lot of capital, but just pushed through, did a lot of deals with our companies around town, and we started another company called Reveal Technologies. And it was in our incubator. And it also was in the testing space. It was not inside our non-compete, but we figured out how to take some military technology through RF signals that flew drones back a long time ago. This was in 2002, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we built a testing application where kids could have handheld devices, test, aggregate all that data, so a professor that had 200 students could ask a question. Everybody could answer it. The professor could look on their screen and say, okay, you have mastery over this, or wait a second, 70% of y'all don't have mastery. So it was real time in classroom or in a hotel. If you were training a lot of pharmaceutical reps, you want to know mastery of content, give them all a device. Now that's common, but when we did it, it was very new. So we did that, and we're blessed enough to sell that to a publicly traded Indian company in 2007.